It's a pleasure for me to speak to you today about FLOSS deployment in Austria. And I know that it's a bit difficult for everybody to listen to me now after this free lunch we got, free white wine, free red wine. But it's a pleasure to be here and to give you this lecture. Everything is on the web, on the osa.eu website, so you can read it thoroughly after the presentation too. Let me start with the remark that FLOSS, open source free software, has been, and will always be a global movement. We come from different countries across Europe, but we shouldn't forget that FLOSS is essentially a global movement. Red Hat and the Georgia Institute of Technology in the USA, they even developed an open source index. I don't know if it is known to you, but if you want to assess the performance of your country or of your neighboring countries as far as FLOSS deployment is concerned in public administrations and at schools, at universities, you can visualize it, thanks to Red Hat and the Georgia Institute of Technology. Then let me say some words about FLOSS licenses. There's a software company in the USA named Black Duck Software, a very original name, Black Duck. They analyzed about 100,000 85 software projects all over the world, and they detected that, that's mind-boggling, 1,698 various licenses exist. It's very difficult even for a judge who knows legalese to assess all these various licenses, more than 1,000, and to see all the differences between them. If we look at the situation in our country, in Austria, we are advanced, we are very advanced. According to the British journal The Economist, which has a worldwide renowned, Austria belongs, as far as e-readiness is concerned, to the 10 most developed countries in the world. Let me say some words about Linux in Austria. We have 3 Linux distributions, which are developed and constantly maintained in Austria. One is called Juxlala. It's for preschool kids. Jux is a colloquial German term for fun. So this distro is devoted to preschool children who should have fun with Linux, who should see that Linux is not hard to use, and is employed in kindergartens. Then we have a distribution which caters to pupils at schools. It's called Desktop for Education. And the last one is GRML. That's a highly sophisticated Linux distribution for geeks. It's only for text users, for network administrators. So in Austria, Linux distributions are developed and maintained for preschool children and for highly sophisticated geeks too. As far as economy is concerned, we have a hub for FLOSS-based business activities. We have a Chamber of Commerce in Austria. Membership is mandatory, like in most European countries, and they do a lot to help especially small and medium-sized enterprises to get their share of the commercial market. The judicial system, as I told you, I am a judge by profession. We switched completely to openoffice.org last year. And from the beginning of this year onwards, it is illegal in Austria to use proprietary formats. So as a judge, when I get Word files or PowerPoint presentations, I reject them. I send them back. When I get a PowerPoint presentation, I write power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts absolutely, and I send it back. I don't open it. I could open it, but I don't do it. And it's a great success. The movers behind this migration were the Austrian judges, and within the next few years, we want to have a completely Windows-free environment in the Austrian courthouses. We started with OpenOffice.org. We have now speech recognition systems, which are highly sophisticated, and our new Minister of Justice, she's a female, she's a judge herself. We will try to convince her to help us to switch completely to a Windows-free environment. That is to say, only open source products will be used by the Austrian judges, by the public prosecutors, and by the other court personnel. To give you some figures, in the Austrian court system, 11,600 persons are employed. There are 13,000 PCs with 19-inch flat screen monitors in use and about 1,000 notebooks. The annual budget for ICT is about 36 million euros. Annually, that is 4% of the overall budget of the ministry. And every 4 years, PCs, notebooks, laser printers, etc., are replaced. The annual ICT costs per individual are about 3,100 euro. So if you look at me, I cost the Austrian taxpayer 3,100 euros as far as ICT is concerned. We are of the opinion that you can't manage what you can't measure. So within the next years, I want to have Linux on my desktop PC in my office. I want to have Debian, a community-driven distribution. I do not want to have commercial flavors. And everything which is done in the courthouses, including speech recognition, which is very complicated, can be done on an open source basis. So you will see in the next years, the court system in Austria will switch completely to open source. The same goes with the Austrian schools. I'm a lecturer too, and most of my pupils have their notebooks, their netbooks. They have sometimes dual boot systems. They have their favorite Linux distribution. An increasing number of students is Linux only. They have Ubuntu, OpenSUSE or other Linux distributions on their laptops. And as a teacher, as a lecturer, I have to handle this situation because the pupils are digital natives. They are very sophisticated and teachers have to follow. We analyzed the situation and as you know, there are 12 academic thinking skills. I do not want to enumerate all of them, like categorizing, classifying, etc. And open source is much better for the overall development of students. That is to say, it enhances the students' creativity, problem-solving skills, self-esteem, etc. And if you look at commercial products, they cost a lot of money and they follow a system of one size fits all, basically. But that doesn't correspond to the situation of the digital natives nowadays because they want to be in control over the software, over the hardware. And Microsoft doesn't give you that control, as you will know, or other commercial companies. So in Austria, we will switch in the complete school system to open source too within the next years. It will start next year. The schools will not get any more funds from the Ministry of Education for word processing. That is to say, they will have to switch to OpenOffice.org too. In 3 years' time, in 2012, the schools will not get any more funds, any more money for operating systems. That is to say, it's a step-by-step approach. And the logic of this process is that a FLOSS-only environment will be created at schools too. Because when the ministries use OpenOffice.org solely, there's a need in the labor market for students, for pupils who are fluent with open source products. And this is a great enhancement. And I will just show you what is necessary for the future. Firstly, a government, a European state, has to have a formulated IT strategy. I'm here in France. I don't know if the French government has a document where the strategy of ICT development in the state is fully explained to the population. We have it. In Austria, that's the IT strategy of the Austrian Ministry of Justice. It says very clearly that FLOSS has to be used in all courthouses in Austria step by step, and we succeeded, and within the next years, as I told you, there will be a complete migration to FLOSS in the Austrian court system. Then that's Ejustice in Austria. All services are available web-based. That is to say, if some person has legal problems, he gets Ejustice done in Austria. There are several applications developed by coders, by programmers, in cooperation with judges, with public prosecutors, with so-called bureaucrats in Vienna. And it's, I think, a very interesting document. And if we want to foster FLOSS, we have to say to the governments that they should produce such documents which can be studied by the population and assessed. I think that a clear agenda should be set, and we have that. The second thing I want to show you is a book. As you know, all capitals have large websites. The city of Vienna has about 50,000 web pages. There are services which can be handled fully online. In Vienna, you have about 500 free stations where every citizen can interact with the regional government of Vienna online, electronically. And usually the virtual world depicts the real world, but it could be the other way around too. The real world should visit the virtual world too. And a famous Austrian author, he analyzed, he sifted through these 50,000 pages and wrote a book about it. It's very interesting. You find a lot of interesting services online. You wouldn't imagine that you can choose your own graveyard, your kindergarten for the children. Everything is web-based. So you don't need proprietary software programs to assess e-government in Austria. If you have a Linux notebook, if you have a Linux netbook, you can do it too. So there is absolutely no necessity to use proprietary formats anymore. I will give this book to Szabad. He's from the neighboring country, from Hungary, because if you maintain a large website and thriving communities, you have always to think how to improve it. And that's a good example, because nobody can sift 50,000 web pages or analyze all online services. But a journalist did it. One day he spent in this online world and wrote a very interesting book about it. It's nice from an aesthetical point of view. There are lots of pictures, graphics, and it's absolutely interesting. It's necessary to constantly fight for Linux. Freedom is very precious. It has to be reconquered every day. I personally write articles in magazines, in Linux mags. As you will know, the oldest Linux mag is the Linux Journal. The first number appeared in March 1994 in the USA. Then we have the Linux New Media in Munich. That's a Linux magazine. It's available in Portuguese, in French too, I think. It's even in English, of course, in the USA. And I wrote an article about how to fight for open source, how to limit the influence of Microsoft and other proprietary subjects. I want to finish my presentation with two citations. Firstly, Richard Stallman once said the only reason we have a wholly free operating system is because of the movement that said we want an operating system that's wholly free, not 90% free. And the second is John Maddock Hall. He said, and I fully agree with him, and I do hope that you will agree with him too. He said, we need to keep talking about free software all the time. Certainly, the advocates of closed source software are untiring and have great resources to push their agenda.